Can't you see I've got the eyes of a champion, brighter than the rising sun? I'm the king of this mountain, standing on the top, looking down on you. This is my legacy. You can't hold me, gravity, 'cause I'm the king of this mountain. Look in the eyes of a champion.
By any means necessary, we gon' see. The blind lead the blind down a dead-end street. I stay 10 toes down, solid like the concrete. I'm raw and rugged, I got love for the struggle, but I'm motivated by the hustle. Yeah, and hate comes with the love too. They envy the fact they can't stop you. I tell you the truth, I will not lose.
Can't you see I got the eyes of a champion, brighter than the rising sun? I'm the king of this mountain, standing on the top.
What's up, Lions Den? Let's give it up for my man, Sean. God. That man is so inspiring. I started following him several years ago, and you know, he's had a deep and profound impact on my life in his ability to be brazen, right? You know, in a cancel culture world, in a world where they want to shut you down and silence you, my man doesn't give a single fuck. And let's give it up for that. You know, he randomly messaged me a while ago and asked me to speak here. I said, sure, what do you want me to do? He said, I want you to come out and tell your story. It's a crazy one. And I want you to spy the fuck out of everyone. I said, shit, Sean. I'll do my best. You know, I'm from a suburb of Boston called Salem, New Hampshire. I grew up in a very loud and crazy environment home. When I was 10 years old in 5th grade, my parents got divorced and my life went sideways. I started drinking, I started smoking weed, and things accelerated for me very quickly. A badge of honor for entrepreneurship, I guess. I hold the state of New Hampshire's record for the youngest individual ever with a drug sales charge. You know, I was in 5th grade at North Salem Elementary School. And I had some older kids in the neighborhood, and I'll give you the visual. You know, I'm a straight up punk. I'm listening to Tupac's Ready to Die album. I got a sideways hat on. I'm riding my Huffy bike around the neighborhood. I'm packing a CO2 pistol, CO2 pellet gun pistol, not scared to use it. And I'm getting quarter pounds of weed fronted from like the 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, and I'm breaking it up to nicks and dimes, and I'm going into the elementary school, and I'm selling weed, and that was the start of my drug dealing career when I was young, and all was going well until I got off the bus, and I was walking up to my apartment building that I was staying at with my mom after my mom and my dad split, and there were 3 cruisers out front. And there was a lot of crazy shit that happened in this apartment building. So I'm walking up, I'm like, oof, somebody's in some shit. And I walked into my apartment, my mom's standing there ready to kill me. And there's 3 officers, and there's, you know, weed and baggies and scales, little hand scales, remember those things? And I was like, shit, you know. And I don't know what was wrong with me. Maybe it was my environment, maybe it was the way I was raised, maybe it was my role models, but from my very youngest years, my earliest memories, like criminals and criminality and gangster culture, I aspired to be just like that, you know? And it just didn't work out for me. You know, fast forward a couple of years, 14 years old, it's 1999. And I'm sitting in my bedroom with my buddy Matt, who I grew up with, and he came over and he broke out an Oxycontin. And at the time, this was the beginning of the height of the opiate craze of Oxycontins. And 14-year-old Eric crushed this thing up with his buddy, and I sniffed half of it. He sniffed the other half. I got high as fuck. And I fell in love. And at that time, I'd been doing all drugs, right? But that was my first time with opiates. 6 months later, I had fallen so much in love with this drug that it had taken over my life. I turned 15 years old, I dropped out of high school. It became my master. And what happened was I didn't really understand what it was. I was young, I'd never been around it, I didn't know anything about it. Most people didn't back then, not like today. Can I get with a raise of hands? Does anyone know anyone that's had addiction or alcoholism? Thank you. Just from my heart, can you raise your hand and tell me if you've been personally affected one way or the other by addiction or alcoholism? I'm with my people, I got it. And I woke up one morning and I said, you know what, I'm done doing these things. It's been a crazy 6 months. I'm gonna lay off of this shit for a little while and get back to the rave scene, get back to the ecstasy and and all this stuff, because I'd just been like sitting in the basement doing drugs. And I stopped, and the next day I woke up and I thought I had the flu. And a friend of mine, Dominic, he died of an overdose when he got out of prison about 7 years ago, showed up at my house and was like, yo, what's up? What's wrong with you? It's like, man, I got the flu. And he was like, yo, have you done any OCs or anything today? I was like, no. He's like, man, you don't got the flu, you're dope sick. And it was a pivotal moment in my life, because I knew at that moment when he explained it to me, I was like, I'm in a lot of trouble. I don't know that I can stop doing these things. Shortly thereafter, Oxycontin turned to heroin, a natural progression. And I'll tell you a little bit about it. I don't go too deep into the war stories, but it was an absolute insane time in my life. I was 15 years old and I'd become a heroin addict, a high school dropout. No job, unemployable, and my world was shrinking very quickly. And so what happened was I took that up as a full-time occupation. My life consisted of dealing drugs, selling drugs, stealing, robbing, street life. By the time I was 17 years old, I was a full-blown junkie on the street. And my friends left. I got so bad that even a lot of the other drug addicts didn't want to hang out with me. I lost the will to live. And it became so dark that I was convinced that I was never going to live past 21. I believed that by 21 years old, and I had accepted in my heart that I was going to be dead, I was going to be in prison, I was going to be one of those two. I was going to be dead or in prison. I never thought that I was going to make it. In this time, I got shot at, I've been stabbed several times. I got my head split open by a crowbar by some gang members in a city named Lawrence, Massachusetts. I overdosed 5 times. I got in legal trouble. I was arrested more times than I could tell you about. In and out of jail. And, my life was just pathetic. And so at 17 years old, I was struggling with all of this, but I started to try to get help. And so for the next almost 5 years, my life was categorized by running hard on my addiction and occasionally going to treatment, going to jail, trying to kick cold turkey, trying to change my life because I wanted something better for myself. I went to treatment for the last time 6 months before I actually got sober. And in there, I did every piece of work that I thought available to me. I swore this thing off and I got out, and within a couple of days I relapsed again. And for 6 months, I was on a kamikaze mission. I was using to die. I did not want to live. And what happened to me was December 6th of 2006, I was 135 pounds. I was homeless. I was sleeping on a pile of blankets in a trap house. I had just gotten out of jail for some things that had happened, and I saw a guy on the street, and he wanted to do a dope deal. He was looking to buy a couple bags of dope. And, being the guy that I was, I said, yeah, sure. Yeah, we can do that. And I took him behind a building in the middle of a bad neighborhood, and I rushed him with a kitchen knife, and I robbed him. I robbed him for $82. And with $82, I went and bought 4 bags of heroin, and I went back up into that trap house on the 3rd floor, and I got high off that heroin, and I hid in a closet while they locked the entire neighborhood down. And God has a sense of humor. We talked about that yesterday with Garrett, that story, right? I love that story. And God uses what God has available. And for me at that time, I was in Portland, Maine at the time, and God used the entire police department. That's what God used. And so, I'm sitting there and I'm hiding in this closet and I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna go to prison forever. Armed robbery in that state, I don't know, 7.5 to 15, a decent plea at that time. And I'm like, I knew it was coming, here it is. And so, what's funny about God is like, and we'll talk about this, I had a long career in addiction treatment. I helped and got in front of tens and tens of thousands of addicts over my career. And I can't tell you how many of them are like, I don't believe in God. I'm like, all right, dude. What about in the moments of desperation? What about in the moments where you think you're gonna die? What about in the moments when you're hiding in a fucking closet and the entire police department's outside and you think you're going to prison forever? I'm not too cool to pray then. I'm not too cool to pray then. That car's about to crash. What is your first instinct? Oh God. Oh God. And we reach out for what we know is true and for what we know has the power. And so, I said a prayer in that closet as I was hiding from these police. I said, God, just one more chance. I know I've been out of chances for a long time, but please, just one more chance and it won't be wasted on me. And the funny thing about that is I thought I was lying because I had no faith. I had no hope. I had no belief in myself, right? I thought I was just going to try again and I was going to fall flat in my face. And what happened to me is God sends messengers. It's one of the reasons I love about this group, and I watch from a distance, and I watch Sean, and he sends teachers and he sends messengers. And your job is to know who's your teacher, who's your messenger, and who not to fucking listen to, right? And so, I went on the run for armed robbery. They knew it was me, and they were looking for me. And so I took off. I left the state of Maine. I went back to my home state of New Hampshire. My mother, who I had this like on and off crazy estranged relationship with, let me stay on her couch, even though she was very vocal about not being happy about it. And, I had a couple sets of clothes that I carried in a trash bag. It was the beginning of winter. It was December 7th of 2006. That's my sobriety date. I've been consistently sober and in recovery then. That's 15 years, so do the math for you. And thank you for that. And I started walking to recovery meetings, and I didn't even have a winter coat. But the thing about that was I started to do something that I've consistently been doing for 15 years, and it's move my motherfucking feet, right? I move. I started moving then. And so I walked down to these recovery meetings, and I started plugging in with those recovery people, and I met a group of men that had been in recovery for a long time. And they loved me enough to tell me the truth despite how I felt about it. And they educated me about my condition of addiction, they educated me about my soul sickness, and they told me about characteristics about myself that I was completely asleep to. I was selfish, self-centered, dishonest, and most of all, I was driven by fear. The fear one got me. The selfishness, I was like, I've stolen from everyone I've ever known, I've taken from society, you might have a point. The dishonest one, I was like, well, yeah, I don't tell the truth very frequently, so you got me. But the fear one, I remember being like, rolling my shoulders, I'm fucking scared of shit. I've been out in these streets, I'm not scared of nothing. He said, yeah? How about telling people how you feel? How about telling people the truth about yourself? How about telling people you're actually terrified, you're scared to death, you suffer from anxiety? I was like, how do you know that? He says, kid, because I am you. I'm just like you. And so, back to God having jokes. I'm walking to these meetings, I'm meeting these guys. There's this one guy, it's apparent that a bunch of people work for him, and I'm figuring it out. It's like he's got this call center. I don't know what it is, but everyone's talking about it. And I'm about a week clean. I'm sleeping on the couch. I'm sick as a dog from withdrawals from heroin. I'm kicking cold turkey, muscling through it, puking, pissing, shitting, but moving my feet anyway. And this guy, Kevin, I said to him, hey man, you got a call center or something, right? He says, yeah. I said, dude, you should give me a job. And he says, why is that? I said, man, I'm a drug addict. I can sell anything. He's like, all right, come on down Monday morning. And so I go down here Monday morning, I got no coat. I'm like walking free. It's like a couple miles from where I'm staying at. I walk down there, but I have nothing. Like I have no money. Guys, I was like broker than broke. No credit cards, I had absolutely nothing. And I'd stolen or borrowed and not paid back from everyone and everything I know. So my credit rating was like less than 0. And so I get to this call center, here I am, this esteemed, gangster, principles, street code, I don't tell my friends, like all this crazy shit that I've been hyping myself up since I was a little kid. And here I am, like just desperate for a chance and just desperate for a little bit of money so I can get some food and hopefully I can get an apartment because my mom doesn't want me there and just trying to figure it out. And he brings me into this call center. It's got all the cubicles. There's a bunch of people I recognize from the meetings. I say hey to a couple of them. He sits me down. I still don't know what we're doing. Hands me a headset. I put the headset on. There's a dialer on the computer. And he starts to explain it to me. I said, Kevin, let me ask you something. What are we selling? He goes, well, we're not really selling. We're selling, but we're not selling, but we're collecting donations. I said, okay, for who? And he looks at me dead serious, and he knew the reaction I was going to get. He goes, the New Hampshire Police Association. I was like, sir? And so what happened to me was I did the job, and I did the job for 6 months, and then I went and back to construction. My dad owned a small tree removal company, right? And he's a wonderful man. He lives with me now. I take care of him. And but he wore work boots every day of his life. And generally, he raised me alone, and I owe him a lot for that. And so the relationship between me and my father had become so estranged. At one point when I was 19 years old, he had a stress-related stroke, and I went into the hospital about in the middle of the night to see him after he'd gone there, and I found out about it. And I remember the doctor telling me, like, kid, you're killing this guy. You gotta change your life. He loves you. You're the only thing he has, and you're killing him. And just to give a little context to the shit that I put this man through. And so me and him, after I've been sober about 6 months, and he started to catch on, all right, maybe it's a little more solid than any of the times before. Maybe I could trust this a little bit. He let me go back to work for him in this little tree removal, excavation company. And I got back to wearing work boots every day. And what happened though was through those men that I had met who had told me the truth about myself and started holding me accountable to a process that I needed to change, right? The thing was that they taught me, and it's ultimately true, is that for me, heroin and everything else was only a symptom of my problem. My real problem was I had such a fucked up internal condition. And I'll tell you now that I'm grateful for me that it was heroin. You wanna know why? Because it brought me to my fucking knees quick. It broke me. And at 21, almost 22 years old, I had to fucking surrender. I was placed I placed myself in a position that I had no choice except to go down this rough road of growth and discovery and change, or I knew what the outcome was. I was gonna die, or I was gonna go to prison. And so I'm grateful for that. But the thing of having a misaligned spirit, of having internal problems, Sean said it when he was just on stage. I was hiding out in the corner listening to most of that. And he said, we're all fucked up. I'm fucked up, you guys are fucked up. We have that in common, right? Does everyone in here believe they have work left to do? right? And so I guess the question for me in my story, heroin fucking broke me. Heroin addiction, everything that came with it broke me, and it brought me to a place that was called surrender. That these problems that we have, in a lot of ways, we need to give up our ideas and our operating system in order to accept a different solution for them. So many times we sit here and just try to execute harder on what we know and continue to get the same results and wonder why nothing's changing, right? And so in that process, one of the things that happened was I got very passionate about helping other people. I got very, very passionate about helping young male drug addicts just like myself. I cared about it. What I didn't understand at the time was that my pain was turning into my purpose. That God was taking my mess and making it the message, right? And so I went to work with my dad for a couple years, a year and a half or so, and I spent the rest of my free time doing outreach and spending, I constantly had a couple of these guys staying in my tiny little $500 a month studio apartment. You know, when I was a year sober, I got my first car, it was a $400 Volvo. I was constantly driving these guys around, spending time with them, going all over, God's green earth, trying to help them. And start to live other-centered, right? I start to have a purpose and a mission. And this is a long time ago. This is 2006, 2007, 2008, right? And I saved up some money and working through my dad, and that was the start of my business, was all of that. And what happened was, with a little bit of help from my dad and the money that I had saved, I bought my first building in October 2008, right at the beginning of the financial crisis, and started the state of New Hampshire's first sober living house. And for the next 2 years, I lived there with the clients. And it was me and these 11 guys. Guys would come, guys would go. We would do recovery together. We would grow together. I'd hold them accountable. We would pray together. We would meditate. We would cook. We would go do commitments. We would do outreach. We would go into the jails. And that was the beginning of a business that became recovery centers. Greater Recovery Centers, happy to talk about that. That business started as me one-to-one helping other people, and got inspired to give them a place to stay, to focus on the work that it is that we do. And I grew it into, the Northeast, probably the East Coast, largest network of addiction treatment facilities. And I sold that business 5 months ago for a healthy 9-figure exit. Give it up for that, why not? My point in this, though, is that through this process, I had to build the man that could build that business. And I think a lot of people look to build the business to build the man or the woman. And it has to be the other way around. I was thinking about that this morning and last night when I was contemplating this talk and just kind of sitting with it. And I was like, I think so many people, and you look on Instagram and all of this, and you have the private jets, and you have the Lambos and the boats and the this and the that, which is all cool. I have all that shit. But people look to that because they think that is gonna have an effect on the person. And the power, because money does bring power, is gonna somehow have an effect on your internal condition and your internal problem. There's one thing I desperately want everyone in here that is on a journey to grow a business, to create a business, to make money, to have a private jet. Sean just told you everybody in here needs a fucking private jet, right? And it's not gonna change how you feel. In fact, it's gonna make it more difficult. Because I'll tell you something, in my studies around addiction, there was a guy named Bruce Alexander. He challenged some of the some of the work that was done around the thesis of what addiction is in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. And he brought a different thought pattern to that. And this is all going to be relative, right? And how we were informed for so long is that, based out of this thesis, they took a rat, they put it in a box, and they gave it 2 bottles of water. One had heroin. They ran this study with heroin and cocaine, and they ran it with drinking water in this box. And in this box, what do you think that rat did? Partied. The rat got fucked up. And so the thesis, what was born out of that, is that heroin and cocaine are addictive drugs. The substance is bad. The prohibition mindset comes from this. Understand? If you use heroin, it's bad. What Bruce Alexander, Dr. Alexander, who wrote the foreword to a book that I put out a couple of years ago, he's become a friend, what he came in and said, well, wait a minute, you're not considering the social context of this. What's the worst punishment we have for a human being? Isolation. You isolated this rat and you gave him two options: sit in this internal pain of isolation or check out through drugs and alcohol. You know, most of those rats during that study, they all became addicted to the drugs and most of them overdosed and died. And so what Bruce Alexander did, which is very interesting, is that he came along and he built this like 10 foot by 10 foot rat cage, and he called it Rat Park. And he put everything in there: wood chips, tin cans, tunnels, the wheels, rat food. And he had male rats and female rats, and they were, you know, doing the rat mamba jamba. And he built essentially, you know, paradise on earth for rats. And what then he did was he introduced the 2 bottles of water. Interestingly enough, the rats would occasionally party, because people like to party, but that's okay. But no rats became addicted. And no rats overdosed. More interestingly, he took an addicted rat from an isolated box. He would purposely get this rat addicted, and then he would introduce it into Rat Park. Now, when you think about how we relate to that, you know, heroin addicts, convicts, all this stuff coming out into our society, what do we think? This is bad. They're going to rob us. Like, they're going to steal our TVs, they're going to do dope, they're going to commit the crimes, all of that stuff. In this setting, because of the social context of this rat, the rat rejoins the community. It goes through the painful withdrawals of getting off of addiction, and almost all rats kick the habit. It's crazy, right? And so my point in that, and let me draw a line between the two, is that you must focus on your internal condition, your internal assets, creating the person that can withstand the pressure of building a business, that can withstand the pressure of wealth, right? Because what do you think happens to one of those rats and their personal relationships in that rat park, in their community, if that rat becomes worth $100 million? You think those relationships get a little strained, right? You give one of those rats $100 million, I guarantee his entire fucking life is going to change, because almost everyone who has a relationship with is going to change. And so in this process of recovery, I started to take myself on. I was selfish, so I started living others-centered, right? I started being helpful at every opportunity that I could get. It was the little things. I would hold doors for people. I would give up my time. I would, just find ways constantly, day in, day out, to try to help other people. My programming that I need to change was I was dishonest. My addiction had made me a liar, a cheat, and a thief. And so I started practicing rigorous honesty no matter what, at all times. And yesterday, I was, getting a little emotional listening to Garrett and Sean's story of, this feud that they had and everything that they had gone through. And this beautiful story of forgiveness, right? And what they brought up is life has a balance sheet, assets and liabilities. Anger, resentment, is a liability. You want to get that off of your balance sheet. It's going to hurt you. A lot of times our ego tells us it's an asset. It's absolutely not. Your anger, your pride is not an asset. And so, the forgiveness is one side of that. How do we get rid of the anger? Well, we forgive. And that is incredibly impactful. But not only did I have to do that, I think that as part of the human condition and the human experience, we all make mistakes. whether we had good intentions or bad intentions, we cruise through this world, as I did, and we make mistakes and we step on the toes of the people around us, right? Was everyone here nice to every kid in high school and elementary school at all times? No. You guys are a bunch of fucking assholes. You know, just like I was. Like, you bullied this kid, you know, it was give and take. And my point is that what was pointed out to me was that I had hurt a lot of people in my life. I had stolen, I had robbed, I had broken their hearts. And I'm sure, you know, plenty of other things. And so I had to make this list of everyone that I'd ever hurt. When I got to writing, and it was like anything and everything. It was the kid I bullied in second grade. It was Walmart because I stole from them. It was anyone, institution or person that I had harmed, right? And so I made this list, and it was 300 people or institutions long. And I set out on this mission. I really attribute the process that I'm going to tell you about into being the most impactful, into the complete transformation that I underwent that then set my fucking life on fire. It really did. What happened was very early on, I went around and I started seeing every single one of those people in that list. Remember me? Can we have a conversation? I was wrong, and I harmed you. I never said I'm sorry. I had a whole lifetime full of I'm sorries. But I would say I was wrong, and I harmed you, and what can I do to make it right? And so, you know, I went to my friends, I went to my parents, and this is crazy. You know, I went into Walmart. I used to treat Walmart like it was my personal ATM in addiction, right? And I don't know if you guys know this, but back in the day, you could literally go into Walmart or Home Depot and like grab something and bring it to customer service, and they'd get, she knows. You either walk to Walmart and they would give you a gift card. And so I would stack up these gift cards and I'd sell them for 50 cents on the dollar, and that's how one of the many ways, creative ways that I fed my addiction. And so I walk into Walmart, I find the woman, I said, hey, can I speak to a manager? And she looks down at me and she says, about what? I was like, oh, lady, you want to do it like that? All right. I'm a drug addict and I used to steal from this establishment and I'm here to make it right. She was like, damn. She says, hold on, sir, sit down. And this woman comes down, and I go through my spiel, I go through my process, I tell her why I'm there, and I tell her what I'm looking to do. And I believe that I'm on a life and death errand here and a mission that I need to get right with the world. And in order for me to do that, I harmed this, you know, your establishment here, and I need to get right with it. And she takes it all in and she says, you just hang on, I'm gonna go get security. I was like, oh shit. And so she went and got security. And do you know that for the next couple of years, I became part of like this group in Walmart in that region in teaching them all the scams? I go to, and I overdosed a bunch. I ended up in one emergency room 4 times in 2 months. I was 19 years old at the time. I was on the methadone clinic for 1.5 years. I was just like done. I was ready to, I used to do drugs, and people would look at the amount of drugs that I was doing, and they'd be like, I wasn't like trying to die, but they'd be like, that might kill you. And I was like, I know. And so the result of that was I overdosed 4 times in 2 months. I ended up at the same hospital, and I would come to, they would hit me with a Narcan, you know, one time I was on life support for 3 days, and real deal stuff, and I was just irate every time. I was a miserable patient for this hospital. One time I remember coming to, I was on a gurney, and they had cut my shirt off of me, and I had the 2 stickies on me because they had paddled me. And I woke up just in time for a cold hand to insert a catheter in me. And I came out, I got my right hand loose and gave a male nurse that was on this side a shot to the face. They hit me with a sedative, I went out. And I remember one time I came to, and I don't really, it's all so crazy because of the drugs, and I was butt-ass naked in the Johnny, running around the nurse's station trying to escape with people chasing me, and so I got to go back to this. I got to go back to this emergency room and make this thing right. And I go in, and same thing. I said, "Can I speak to whoever runs this emergency room?" They say, "Sure." I sit there for 3 hours in the waiting room of emergency room because they're busy. A woman finally comes out and gets me, brings me to my heart's pumping out of my chest, right? And brings me all the way back to the other side of the hospital, sits me in this little conference room and says, "So how can I help you?" And I said, "Ma'am, my name's Eric Spofford. I'm a drug addict, and I harmed your hospital." And I tell her what happened. This lady starts crying. I'm like, "Why the fuck's she crying?" She says, "Eric, we remembered you, obviously. You're very dramatic when you came here." And we thought you were dead. We still talk about you, wondering what happened about you. And she said, "I've never seen anyone like you get better. Normally, people like you come here until we find out you're dead." And me and this woman had obviously a cracked wide open heart-to-heart moment here. She's crying, I'm crying. And for years after that, I think she left and took a different job, and so did some of the people, but for years in that hospital, when they got a drug addict that would come in off an overdose or whatever other related situation, they would call me. It's like 15 minutes from my house. And I saw hundreds of people in that emergency room sitting by their bed, talking to them. "Claudia, I used to be here." So I told you that the last thing that I did was I robbed that kid for $82, right? And I had been up in Maine. I went to Maine originally for 2 years to try to change my life. It didn't work out for me. And I had been in jail. I had gone on the run for all the, this court stuff I had going on. So I had warrants, and everything was just a mess up there. And I was a year and a half sober, and I knew that this thing was just looming over my head. And my life was starting to pick up. Like, things were starting to get real. I mean, in the first year of sobriety, I remember a couple times we got pulled over, and I'd bang, take off out of the car, go literally foot chase from cops, on my way to an AA meeting or something. But a little crazy. But I couldn't live like this. The stress and anxiety of being on the run and knowing that I had to get right with the world, and I was on this mission, I just knew that I had to turn myself in. What am I gonna do? Raise a family and have a career while I'm on the run? Like, I gotta get this over with. And so I set my life up. I had a dog. I dropped it off at my dad's house. I got all these letters from all these people saying, I'm a good guy now, I'm reformed, whatever. And I went up to Maine, and I walked into the courthouse, and I saw the woman. I said, "I'm here to turn myself in on warrants." She says, "You gotta go upstairs to courtroom 5. I said, "All right." I go up to courtroom 5, 2 big, wood, heavy doors. I say a prayer. And in my mind, how I prepared for this was like, God's in charge, man. God's in charge. I've done so much of this work, and I'm esteemed, and I'm changing, and I'm alive, and I can feel it. And I just know that, I have faith. And if what that means is that God is gonna send me to prison, I should have gone anyway, but if he's going to send me to prison on a mission, because where there are more drug addicts in one more concentrated place than prison, then that's the mission that I'm on. That it's my job to go in there and carry a message of recovery and help people for as long as he sees fit, because ultimately this is his world. And so I say my prayer, and I said, "God, it's going to be what it's going to be. I know she told me where the prosecutor's going to be, and I got to go see him." And I open the doors, I start walking down. It's like a row like this with the seats, and the seats on both sides, and I'm going. And this guy grabs me by the arm when I'm about halfway down, and I look, and it's this dude that used to come into the jail and carry a message of recovery, and I'd see him at the 12-step meetings, and he's just in the recovery community, older dude that was always trying to help me, always. His name was Johnny. And I really only ever talked to Johnny before because I'd ask him for a cigarette. And then he'd talk to me about God, and I'd be like, can you shut the fuck up, you know? And so he's like, Eric? And I'm like, Johnny? He scoots down. He's like, why don't you sit down? I'm like, all right, you know? And so I sit down, and the whole time I'm like, man, I don't want to be talking to this dude from AA, you know what I mean? I'm trying to go to prison. Like, and he's like, what are you doing? I haven't seen you in like a while, a couple of years or something. And I'm like, yeah, man, I've been sober, and I'm down in New Hampshire now and doing well and sponsoring all these guys, helping all these guys, got all these good things going for me. But, the way I left Maine was not good, and so I'm in some trouble up here. Like, I got to really get that cleaned up before I can get on with my life, right? And I'm like still frustrated, like trying to hurry through this. He says, what do you got in your hands? So I show him all my letters. He says, Eric, I don't know if you know this because you met me in recovery, and I've been sober for 25 years, but I'm a criminal defense attorney. You're shitting me. And he says, I've known that prosecutor a long time, and if it's okay with you, I'd be happy to go up and talk to him for you. And I said, okay, that would be just fine. And so I sat down, and he went up and got him, and they came over, and he introduced him to me, and I talked to him, and then they left, and they came back, and it felt like an eternity. He came in and says, Eric, come here. And I ended up getting like suspended time, and long story short, I ultimately ended up with like a $100 fine. And my point is that when God shows up, God shows up. Right? And it's the stuff. It's the stuff and the work that I hope this weekend, these 2 days, the Lions Den Live 2022 brings up for you. And that you leave here and you can hear me and Sean and all these other amazing people that have been up here and will be up here speaking, and it identifies within yourself what your body of work to do is. Guys, you want to talk about, I wish I had more time. I know Sean's got me on Q&A here in a couple minutes. I have a crazy house in Miami. I have a crazy house in New Hampshire. I own a private jet. I own a 100-foot fucking yacht. I got all the stuff. I got all of it. There's nothing left. It's cool. I like it. It doesn't do a fucking thing for this. Not a thing. I want each and every single one of you to have all of that and more. Sean does too. I mean that. Win so fucking hard, so fucking loud. You'll get attacked. That's okay. I've been attacked 1,000 times. The path here is filled with adversity, filled with backstabbings and lawsuits and gossip and accusations and slander and people trying to dim your light and take you out and shut you down. Fuck them. Win and do it loud. But also don't ignore the language of the heart. Because that, without this, it's hollow, shallow, and meaningless. And if you end up the rat in Rat Park that for whatever reason can't connect with the other rats, that's not a good day in rat world, right? And it's not going to be a good day for you. Guys, I very much appreciate you sharing your time with me. I consider it actually the greatest honor that someone could give. Time, right, is our scarcest commodity. One of the things I didn't talk about, and if I had more time, I would, but I'll breeze through it quickly, is that on this journey of recovery and helping people and building a business, and I also develop real estate and built apartment buildings and do all this crazy stuff. If you guys remember, it was national news in like 2012, 13, 14, 15, fentanyl showed up, right? And overdose rates took off. They're up 15% this year over last year, 30% last year over the year before. Statistically, you're more likely to die of a fentanyl overdose as an 18 to 55-year-old adult than you are a car accident. And what happened, I know it's crazy, and what happened with that was everyone that I grew up with, all these street kids, all these kids from broken homes, all these kids that I was out there and was shoulder to shoulder and really did this thing with, They all died. And so something that we're supposed to go through in life, at the end of life, right? 70s, 80s, your people start to die. I went through in my 20s and my early 30s. I don't say that to be morbid or fuck your day up. I say that because I want to try to share the lesson that I learned in that. And it changed me forever. It made me acutely aware of my own mortality. We all know that we're gonna die. If one by one I asked you, you think you're gonna live forever? You'd be like, no. Well, then why the fuck are you living like you think you live forever? Right? We are going to die. Time is a scarce commodity. We are all running out of it. You must make the most of it. You fucking have to. Do you guys know, I'll leave you with this. Do you know what my biggest fear is? Number one, regret. My number one fear is regret. My number one fear is getting to the place where I'm almost out of time and how my heart is in that moment. And I live my life reverse engineering that moment, which sure as fuck is coming for all of us. And I let that inform what I do now. Do you think in that moment you're gonna give a shit about the people hating on your success? Fuck no. Live for that. Live for your funeral, right? Live for the legacy. Do the work. Make the fucking impact. Because why not? What do you have to lose? Right? I love you guys. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
So much of your time, but your story hit me on a lot of different levels. I don't know if you have any kids, but 2 years ago, my dad died of a crack overdose, and I mourned his death like when I was 11 years old. It was a hyper-abusive, mentally, physically relationship across the board. I didn't find out until after his death that everybody in the fucking family knew what he was doing. All that aside, what would you say to a family or children that have dealt with that their entire lives? Because I told them, get clean, or you're never going to see me again. 10 months later, he was dead. Like, he chose drugs over his family. How do you confront that? It's violent, it's brutal, and they ultimately want to die.
How do you confront handling the grief?
What would you do? Like, how would you tell a family member to acknowledge that sign, not ignore it, or maybe investigate further? Because when you're dealing with abuse, it's really scary to go to somebody like that and say, hey, you have a problem, because they might fuck you up.
That's a difficult question to answer because each situation is so uniquely different, right? Sometimes I might not. In an abusive situation, I wouldn't send someone back into the abuse personally. I would tell them that person that it's their job to hold a healthy boundary with whoever their abuser is, even if they're a loved one, a parental figure. I think ultimately though, for the loved ones of people that love addicts, it's easy to be angry at the addict, and it's easy to blame them for good reason. That doesn't negate the fact that it's still your work to do. They don't need to change, some of them never will, in order for you to be free. And so I would turn that person back into the work that they need to do in order to find the freedom. If I want to be free, it has to be me. Nothing out here has to change for me to experience and find that freedom.
It's Damien.
Eric.
I actually was
Cool.
helping Rachel a lot over the last few weeks.
Awesome,
I'm
man.
her boyfriend, so I was trying to get all stuff ready and
Cool.
designing all this stuff. But just a lot of your story.
good to meet you,
I was
brother.
reading a lot and man, a lot of the same stuff. So,
Appreciate that.
yeah, really, inspired to.
Thank you.
Know I can keep going and do all that.
100% you can, man.
Appreciate you.
All right.
That gave me that right now.
It's-
Like you say,
It's all in here.
Yeah.
Which is hard to put out in Instagram world, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The pictures of the planes and the cars get a lot of likes, but it's really the work that we fucking do.
I appreciate you.
Oh man, knock him dead tonight, dude.
Yeah, dude,
Keep it raw and real. Good job up there.
Thanks, you too.
Yeah, absolutely, cool. I'm out of here soon. Yeah, they got an NFT, some sneaks, a bobblehead. Yo, look at what they got. That's unbelievable. Thank you.